So I wanted to add a little bit more background and context for the post, just to clarify that yes, there are dumb names. And I think a good rule of thumb is if you're doing something with a name just to make it more cool, it's probably going to end up dumb. This could be, of course, rooted in my own experience as somebody who was not really popular for most of my life, in that I automatically assume that anything which is cool is probably dumb. So that maybe that's it, and you can just excuse what I'm saying with that. But I really think that doing something just for the sake of being cool is dumb. Doing something with your child's name that they will have for their entire life, just because you think the name is cool, is also dumb. Now, can something be unusual and not dumb? Of course. Think of it as a Venn diagram, right? There's unusual in a circle and dumb in a circle, and there may or may not be overlap. Let me give an example, and I guess it really depends on context, right? To somebody in a lot of places, my name, Jacob, might be considered dumb. Definitely in a lot of places it would be considered unusual. The name Jacob is unusual in a lot of the world. Really anywhere that's not English speaking. Even in places where it is English spoken, I think it is unusual when you stop and remember that James and Jacob they have the same meaning. They have the same roots in a lot of languages, and in some languages you only really have one or the other of them, and both are translated into English as Jacob. I think that's or whatever, Jacopo or Iago or whatever. But the name that is translated James in, for instance, the King James Bible is in Hebrew Yaakov, which is also obviously Jacob. So things change and you got to know the context. And that's why I'm comfortable speaking about the context of a post about dumb names among white Mormons in Utah. As a white Mormon who spent a lot of time in Utah and more time in Idaho, where there are also a lot of dumb names, I feel like I'm peculiarly qualified for that. And I know that within folks that I know who've done this, they've done it because they think the names are cool. Sometimes they want to take an archaic name, a family name, a name that they already like, and then add a little bit of a cooler spin on it, right? I understand that. That doesn't mean that I don't think that it's dumb, but I don't think that this is something that I don't think this is something you can blame the child for, of course. Now, obviously on the playground, names do have power and kids are going to get taunted for their names. I really doubt that a girl named Madison, Madysyn, is going to get that many more taunts than a girl named Madison, Madison. Right? However, I think we can agree that Madison, Madysyn is dumb. There is no reason to name it, to spell it that way, unless you're really just trying to make it cool, or you have a fetish for the letter Y, which, looking back at that list, maybe some people do, and that's probably not something I'm clinically qualified to address. But perhaps what really chaps my gourds about this is that some people that I know, and I don't want to make a great generalization, but again, growing up in Idaho, a white culture, there's a lot of mockery of the names that some black people give their children. A lot of mockery of the prefixes and the suffixes and the asterisks and all these other things. And as I've learned more about the reasons for that, these are things that as a kid I thought were dumb. And seeing people that I know when I was younger, and we all do, of course, grow and change, say that naming your children weird names is dumb, and then doing it themselves, but not understanding the reason why these names were made unusual in the first place is both hypocritical and a pain in the butt to me, of course. So let's get into that for a second. For my friends back home who might not know, in the 1960s, there was, of course, the Black is Beautiful movement, the African diaspora movements, the Pan-African movements, lots of movements to embrace the African portion of African American culture, to turn it from something negative into something positive. As a part of this, Swahili was kind of, adopted isn't the right word, but it's the best word I can think of right now, as the language of the American African diaspora. There's reasons for this. That's another essay for another day if you want resources. I'm happy to share some. I think tweet would be better. But that's neither here nor there. So with that, taking Swahili and taking Bantu naming conventions, taking the way that they use prefixes, that they use infixes, that they construct nouns in a very different way than English does. I know some friends out there speak German, and the way in German you can, you don't have adjectives, you just mash more things onto a word. Very similar thing in some African languages. So it became, as a way of reconnecting to the lost past of the homeland, it became a style to put the Swahili and Bantu prefixes into names, or to try to construct names along old African patterns, right? That's very unusual. That's not dumb. There's a purpose and a meaning to it. Are there people who later on took that too far? In my opinion, yes. And again, this is coming from my personal context. Because they saw what other people were doing and they wanted to do that because it was cool. See prior comments, right? It's understandable, much like I think that the names coming in that post and throughout the Rockies are understandable. I'm not saying I do not understand why people are doing this, but there's not a connection to it, if that makes sense. There's not a tied, connected meaning. And that's why, again, it goes back to the difference between dumb and unusual. One of my friends who commented on that, and I've been talking a bit about this, her name means, in not English, the light of God. It's a really cool name. In English, it's really unusual, right? But when you know the reason, you know that it's not dumb. And even if it is unusual, I mean, it may seem like a dumb name in the first place. The issue here with these names, going back to it again, is I do not know a single person who has named their children Brakyley, Brakylliegh, for any other reason than they thought it was cool. There was a movement in my, again, Rocky Mountain context a few years ago to create names by mashing your two grandmothers' names together. This is where Reni Esme comes from, of course, in the Twilight films, or the Twilight books. Gosh, did you really just say Twilight films first? Praises be. And that's something that I understand the meaning behind it. And I think that perhaps what we're seeing right now is an outgrowth of that. But really, it's people just trying to do things that they think are cool. And if there's anything learned in life, stuff that is cool is probably dumb. Except Star Wars and the Marvel movies.